I believe most of the people in this room today are thinking about belonging the wrong way. Right now, there's a kid that's been chucked out of class. They're in the corridor, they're all alone, just out of sight. And for the next 15 minutes, I want you to sit with this. That kid might just be the most important teacher in this room today. Not me, but them. Because what I've learned about belonging doesn't sit in boardrooms or at networking events. It's actually from kids like that, the ones the system gave up on. And by the end of this talk, I believe you might just have learned something from them as well. You see, the problem that I have with it is that we teach kids algebra. We teach them adverbs. I was taught sedentary rock. We teach them how to revise, comply, sit still, but no one sits them down and says, what lights you on fire? What makes you so angry that you do something about it? What's the one problem in the world that you want to solve? But we don't, because the system rewards compliance and recall, not curiosity, meaning, or contribution. And then we're all scratching our heads and wondering, why are kids so disengaged? Why are they so angry or anxious or apathetic? Because we label them, we manage them, and when that doesn't work, we exclude them. And I know this because I've spent years building systems and environments for those young people. But I also know this because I was one myself. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, about why I believe that purpose matters more than belonging, and 3 big lessons that I've learned along the way. I grew up with big feelings and no roadmap. I was undiagnosed ADHD as a kid, can you imagine that? But I was also abused. And I carried the trauma of that abuse so deeply inside myself that I didn't say a word until I was a 39-year-old man. Instead, I wore a mask. I learned to perform. I became a social chameleon. I knew who to be in any given room, at any given situation, at any given time. And I was good at it. But the problem with wearing masks is that they're heavy. And the longer you wear them, the more you start to forget who you are underneath them. I absolutely hated school, like with a passion. But you wouldn't have known it. I've still got mates to this day who sat next to me who had no idea how I was feeling. I was angry. I would flick rubbers at teachers. I would disrupt the class. I remember I'd be sat next to someone and they'd be writing. I'd be sat next to the other person, they're writing. I didn't even know we were supposed to be writing. I'm looking at the whiteboard. There's words and numbers all over it. The teacher's over there saying something to the class. Someone's tapping me on the shoulder and someone's bouncing a ball in the playground. Totally overwhelmed. So, of course, being the disruptive, angry kid, I don't blame the teachers for hating me. I really don't. I'd have probably hated me. And it ultimately led to discredits, which led to detentions, which led to suspensions. Until one day, I was walked out into a corridor that is etched into my brain. It was more like a hospital. Pale green walls, long as you could get, double swing doors, smell of the floor polish coming off the floor, and a tiny little table and chair just there up against the wall. Scuff marks where it had been sort of pushed into position. And my name was all over it. And that's where I sat for well over a term. Out of sight, out of mind, all alone. I remember the shame that I felt as a kid when people would walk past that and I was sat there. And after a while, your little brain doesn't think, the system's letting me down, because you don't really have those words. You actually think, I don't matter. I don't belong. And that thought, that corrosive little thought, it sticks with you. And it followed me around for decades. It followed me into every room, every interview, every relationship. It followed me into a deeply unfulfilling career where I was sort of chasing status and pay rises and trying to be the man, trying to belong. And it worked for a while until it didn't. And then my mask didn't just crack, it absolutely shattered. Very few people have seen this photo. That's me. I'm on the edge of a bed. I'm in a very small room, and it was day one where I'd been checked into a mental health facility. My wife had left me 2 minutes previous, and yeah, it was a tough time. I want you to look at the face, because look at the misery. Look how upset I am. That's the look of a man who has been chasing belonging his entire life, trying to fit in, trying to wear that mask his entire life, and it's just completely broken down. That was my lowest point, rock bottom. But it was also the first honest moment that I'd had with myself in decades. And there was something about that blend of sort of honesty and misery that opened the door just a little for something positive to creep inside. 3 weeks later, I was back to work and back to my family. I'd always worked in sales and marketing, but in my later career, I'd found a real passion for helping people find their purpose. I could walk into a boardroom, ask a few sharp questions and sort of get to the truth that moved people, but I never took a step back and said, what moves me? What lights my fire? Then COVID hit and the world went deathly quiet. And COVID was a game of two halves for me. The first half, I was a functioning alcoholic. I'd finish my work by 2 o'clock, have a barbecue every day. There's a few people in the audience today that were drinking with me. And the other half, once I felt absolutely awful from doing that, I did the classic ADHD thing of going teetotal and writing a big bucket list of positive things to do. And that is another story, but at the very bottom of that list, the last entry was paint a picture. I had never painted a picture before, but how hard could it be? So I followed YouTube videos. I bought a canvas, I bought some paint, and there's a critic in the audience today, my wife, and when I turned round this first painting expecting the worst, she actually said, oh, that's Carter, that's our son. So I was like, wow, okay. The second painting someone bought, and after that, I had an endless list of commissions. It was a beautiful, creative, incredible journey, and that definitely is another talk. But why I'm talking about it is I posted a story on my social media. I said, who wants a painting? Who deserves one? Because for me, it was never about selling them. I much preferred giving them away or doing cool stuff with charity. And I got loads of inbound messages, but one stood out. It was a chap called Brian. Brian ran an alternative provision, a place for excluded kids, where kids that weren't quite getting on in school, they had a place to go. And he told me about a kid called Charlie. Charlie was near drug addiction. He'd been kicked out of home, kicked out of school, and he was at a real crisis point. But through the amazing work that Brian and his team had done, this kid had turned his life around. And I was so inspired by it that I painted a picture of Kobe Bryant dunking a heart, like a symbol of transformation, and I agreed to drive it down to this alternative provision. When I walked through the door, something hit me. It wasn't the building itself, it was grubby, like scuffs and boxing bags swinging, slight smell of sweat. It wasn't that, it was the people inside it, the mentors. These mentors were showing up day in, day out for young people who had every right to have given up, but they hadn't. They were all doing the work. I met Brian, I met Charlie, and at this point I'm reluctantly giving them that painting up there because it probably meant more to me than it did to them. And in that moment, I didn't want to belong. I didn't want to be the man, I didn't want to make people laugh, I wanted to be useful. That was the spark. 5 years on from that now, and we haven't looked back. Brian and I grew Story Group, a company that has alternative provision, care homes, tutoring, tech, if it puts a young people back on a pathway, we make it our mission. I finally had all of the stuff that I'd learned in a previous career that I'd almost discounted, I could now funnel into something that I truly believed in. I realized that my purpose wasn't building brands. It was actually building pathways for young people like Charlie and young people like me. We're now on a mission to positively impact 1 million young lives by 2030, and we will do it. But today I want to tell you a little bit about a couple of the amazing kids that have come across my path in the last few years. The first is a kid called Kieran. Kieran was the youngest drug dealer in London, which is a very unfair title because he was too young for that. He was groomed. They used to pack his little school bag full of drugs, and they used to send him on missions to deliver drugs to some of the most dangerous people in this country. He saw shootings, he saw stabbings, he saw people being murdered. And it got so bad that the police intervened and told his gran that if they did not move him out of London, he would not survive. So she did, and she moved him to Berkshire, and luckily for us, she moved him to our alternative provision. And he arrived and he was angry and guarded and shut down, all the things that you can imagine, but he did the work. We did the work. And he started to turn things around. But the story doesn't end there, because after he left us, he ended up in prison. And when he came out, he had a young daughter, and he messaged us and he said, I need help. I need to turn my life around. So we met him. We met him down the Nando's. We took him for a Nando's. And instead of doing the usual thing that you do, here's a CV, here's how you find a job, here's who I know who may have a job, we did something radical. We asked him, what matters to you? And after a while of thinking about it, he told us he was a musician. He'd been a grime artist. He'd been in and out of studios his entire life. He would love to create a community music studio for kids like him and help them. So we sort of looked at each other and realized we couldn't do that for him. We didn't have the money, but I asked him a different question. What if I put you on a pathway for one? So he jumped at the chance. He told us he'd taught himself to clean in prison. Cars, offices, homes. So we came up with this amazing idea for a cleaning company he could use as a vehicle to provide for his family, but also to save for a music studio. We called it Harmonized Cleaning. He hasn't hit that goal yet. He doesn't have the music studio, but that is not the point. He totally turned his life around. We didn't jump up and rescue him. We just asked him what mattered. Then there's Leo. Leo is bright, he is funny, and he is ADHD out the ears. And I say that in jest because so am I. And he reminds me so much of me when I was a kid. Leo was struggling with reading and writing. He was also being bullied. School was not his place. But basketball was his passion. One day he was in a PE lesson and the teacher and one of the students were arguing about the rules. He knew the rules. This was his thing. But he argued it way too passionately and he was sent out. Now, most kids like Leo, who are sent out like that, rejected, they crumble. But not this guy. This guy did something remarkable. He turned up the next day with a basketball. At break time, he told people he was starting a basketball club. At lunchtime, 2 people joined him. The day after that, 5 people joined him. And by the end of the week, people were queuing up. The bullies were queuing up. And he did something that blows my mind. He didn't turn them away. He started streaming. He had different groups based on ability, even the bullies. How about that for character? Major character. Same kid, just a different direction. For me, these stories carry 3 really, really important lessons. The first is that kids aren't born disengaged or naughty. There is always a reason. You saw that with my story. You have to be brave enough to do the work and look and find out what that is. Brian always says to me, You don't learn from people you don't like. You have to build that relationship to get to know someone, to understand them, to be able to help them. The second is that if you give a kid, or an adult for that matter, a reason to exist, something to build, you will see them come alive. I've sat with kids that were completely shut down, non-verbal, but you give them a camera, you tell them to go take some pictures, and you'll watch them spring up. A week later, they're teaching others how to do it in the same venue. And I guess the third, and probably the most poignant for today, is stop trying to fit in. Go find something that matters so much to you that it doesn't matter if people do it with you or not. Like Leo, and actually like Brian and I. I believe that purpose is the antidote to disconnection. It changed my life, it changed Kieran's life, and it's changing Leo's in a playground with a basketball right now. I came here to talk about belonging, but I realised you can't chase belonging. Purpose is the route to belonging. It always has been. So if you're sat in this room today and you're wondering where you fit in, stop doing that. Go find something that sets your soul on fire, something you care about and will take responsibility for so much that you don't care if people do it with you. But here's the kicker, they will do it with you. Maybe that kid at the beginning in the corridor isn't naughty or disengaged. Maybe they're just waiting for someone to give them a reason to stand up from the table, build a better classroom altogether where everyone is included. Belonging isn't the answer. Purpose is. Thank you.